Hey guys, tonight we embark on a journey across time and ocean, to a place where the world felt brand new, yet impossibly ancient. Now, dim the lights, perhaps light a gentle candle, and let the soft hum of the night be our companion. Find a comfortable spot, maybe wrap yourself in a cozy blanket, and let's ease into tonight's story together. Take a moment to breathe deeply, letting go of the day's worries, and let me know in the comments where you are tuning in from and what time it is for you. If you enjoy these journeys, a quiet like and a subscribe would mean the world, but only if it feels right. Tonight, we're sailing to the edge of the known world, to a place where stars spun differently, and the earth itself felt alien. We're diving into the dust and starlight of early Australia, a saga of survival, resilience, and the relentless spirit of those who built a new home on a distant shore. Welcome to Starlight and Dust in Sydney Cove, chronicles of early Australian survival. Imagine, if you will, the endless monotonous rocking of a ship. Not a pleasure cruise, not a swift passage across a familiar sea, but 8 long agonizing months of nothing but horizon. Every day, the same creaking timbers groan beneath your feet, the same salty air bites at your exposed skin, and the same vast, indifferent ocean stretches out in every direction, an unbroken expanse of blue that seems to mock your confinement. You've been confined, cramped, your senses dulled by the relentless monotony, yet paradoxically sharpened by the constant low thrum of anxiety that vibrates through the ship. For 8 months, the world has been a wooden box, a fragile coffin, adrift on an endless, indifferent plain. You've eaten stale biscuits, felt the damp chill creep into your very bones, and watched, with a quiet dread, as fellow travelers succumb to the ravages of scurvy, or the quiet despair of a future unknown. The constant murmur of prayers, the hushed whispers of homes left behind, the rhythmic splash of waves against the hull soon. These have been the soundtrack to your exile. Then, one crisp morning, a whisper ripples through the deck, gaining momentum, swelling into a collective murmur of disbelief and hope. Land. Not the familiar, comforting green hills of England, not the quaint stone-built fishing villages, but something utterly, profoundly different. As your ship, part of the First Fleet, finally glides into a vast, shimmering harbor, what greets your eyes is not beauty in the European sense, not comfort, but an overwhelming sense of the raw, the untamed, the ancient. This is Sydney Cove, January 1788. The coastline is a rugged tapestry of muted greens and grays, dominated by the tall, skeletal, blue-tinged eucalyptus trees that stand starkly against the brilliant sky. The air, surprisingly, carries a scent you've never encountered, finely, a clean, sharp, almost medicinal aroma of sun-baked leaves, mixed with something earthy and unfamiliar. A wild, untamed fragrance that speaks of millennia of undisturbed nature. There are no grand buildings, no bustling markets, no neatly cultivated fields promising sustenance. Just an unbroken expanse of ancient bushland, stretching as far as the eye can see, under a sky that feels impossibly vast. A deeper, more intense blue than any you've ever witnessed. The sun beats down with a dry, penetrating heat, unlike the softer warmth of a European summer. As you disembark, your legs unsteady from months of seafaring, the first thing you notice is the ground beneath your feet. It is not the soft, loamy soil of Europe, nor the familiar cobblestones of a city street. It is a fine, reddish dust, dry and yielding, It puffs up with every hesitant step. It clings to your worn boots, finding its way into every crease of your clothes, settling on your eyelashes. This is the land of red earth, of baked clay, of ancient, unyielding rock, a palette of ochre and rust. The silence, broken only by the strange, echoing calls of unknown birds, a kookaburra's jarring laugh, the distant caw of a crofindee, is profound, almost heavy. A silence that hums with the presence of something vast and indifferent. A profound realization settles deep in your gut, colder than the ocean spray. You are at the very edge of the known world, cast out, transported. Abandoned it feels to this wild, sun-drenched continent, a place that feels both empty and overwhelmingly alive. The sheer distance, the 8 months of ocean, presses down on you with a psychological weight heavier than any chain, any physical burden. This isn't just a new land. It is another planet, far removed from everything you've ever known, a place where the familiar rules of existence seem to have been rewritten. And as your feet sink slightly into that dry, ochre dust, feeling its gritty texture between your toes even through your worn leather, you understand that this is where your new life, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, truly begins. The dust whispers of ancient stories, and you are now a part of them, with the initial shock of arrival slowly fading, replaced by the immediate, pressing demands of survival. The most urgent need becomes shelter. There are no readily available quarries for stone here, no skilled masons waiting to lay foundations, no brick kilns to fire the familiar building blocks of home. The land, in its raw, untamed state, demands ingenuity, a deep resourcefulness, and a humble surrender to its most basic, raw materials. Your first task, alongside hundreds of others, whether free settler or weary convict, is to build. Not palaces, not even proper cottages, but rudimentary havens. Simple enclosures against the elements and the vast, unsettling openness of this new world. The most common and effective method, a technique quickly learned through necessity and observation of the natural world, is called Wattle and Daub. It begins with the bush itself, an endless, dense expanse of unfamiliar vegetation. You walk through the scrubland, the relentless sun beating down on your neck, searching for the right branches. The Australian acacia, with its tough yet surprisingly pliable branches, becomes your most crucial ally. You gather armfuls of these branches, their leaves a muted, dusty green, their bark often peeling in thin, papery strips, releasing a faint woody scent as you snap them from the parent tree. The air, thick with the dry, slightly pungent aroma of the eucalyptus, a constant, pervasive companion in this new alien world, mingles with the faint sweetness of the acacia. Back at the designated settlement area, a bustling, chaotic scene of temporary tents and nascent structures. The real work begins. You learn to weave. Imagine yourself, hands quickly becoming calloused and stiff, muscles aching in your shoulders and back, taking the longer, sturdier branches and pushing them vertically into the sun. Baked earth. These form the upright posts, the skeletal frame for a wall, marking out the precise, compact dimensions of your future dwelling. Then, with the smaller, more flexible acacia twigs, you begin to interlace them horizontally, weaving them in and out, over and under the vertical posts, creating a sturdy, resilient basket-like lattice. The rhythmic snap and rustle of the branches as they bend and lock into place, The soft creak of wood under tension becomes a familiar, almost hypnotic sound. Your fingers ache, your nails often broken, but slowly, painstakingly, the structure takes shape, a crude but strong framework. Once the wattle frame is complete, the daub comes next, the earth itself becoming your plaster. This is a concoction of the readily available reddish clay, mixed with water, often supplemented with straw, dried grass, or even animal dung to give it strength, texture, and bind it together. It's a messy, earthy business, a tactile connection to the very soil you're trying to tame. You scoop generous handfuls of the damp, cool mixture and press it firmly into the woven framework, pushing it through the gaps from both sides, ensuring every crevice, every tiny opening is thoroughly filled. The clay feels cool and gritty against your skin, its rich, earthy scent rising in the hot air, a primal aroma of damp soil and organic matter, as the sun climbs higher, relentlessly baking the vast landscape. The newly applied daub begins its slow, deliberate transformation. You can almost hear it, if you listen closely, a subtle, almost imperceptible whisper as the moisture gradually evaporates from the thick, wet earth. Tiny, intricate cracks may spiderweb across the surface as it dries and shrinks, a testament to the raw, untamed nature of your building materials, a reminder that even your shelter is a part of this wild land. The finished wall, once thoroughly sun-dried, is a pale reddish brown, often uneven, but surprisingly solid and remarkably effective against the wind and the sun. Inside these humble wattle and daub huts, the space is compact, often shared with several others, a tight community in miniature. There are typically no windows, or perhaps just a small, unglazed opening, a rough aperture cut into the wall, allowing a sliver of light and a breath of air to filter through. The ceiling might be thatched with reeds or long grasses, offering a thin, rustling barrier against the harsh glare of the sun or the sudden, torrential downpours. It is a tight, enclosed world, a stark contrast to the vast, overwhelming openness outside. But within these simple walls, made from the very earth you stand on, you find a basic shelter, a place to rest your weary body, a small, human-made pocket of safety and warmth in an otherwise overwhelming wilderness. The constant scent of dry clay and wood, warm from the sun's embrace, mingled with the faint aroma of smoke from a small internal fire, slowly becomes the indelible smell of home, a scent of survival. As days bled into weeks and weeks into months, the initial shock of arrival and the strenuous labor of building shelter gradually gave way to a deeper, more insidious and utterly pervasive challenge: hunger. This period, stretching into years for some, would become known as the starving time, a relentless, gnawing emptiness at the edges of every waking moment. The ships that brought you here, laden with human cargo and limited provisions, could only carry so much, and the promised bounty of this new land proved elusive, or at least stubbornly unfamiliar and resistant to European farming methods. Each week, the same ritual. You would line up, your stomach already rumbling with a dull, persistent ache, your eyes scanning the faces of your companions for signs of dwindling hope. You'd shuffle forward, slowly, to receive your meager rations. The list was always depressingly similar, a testament to scarcity: a small quantity of flour, often damp and riddled with weevils, its smell faintly musty, clinging to the rough sackcloth. This wasn't the fine white flour of Europe, but a coarse, gritty substance, often mixed with bran, that promised little in the way of palatable bread. Then, a few ounces of salted pork or beef, preserved to withstand the long, arduous voyage, but now intensely briny, almost painfully so. The salt, meant to save the meat from spoilage, also made it difficult to swallow, leaving your tongue tingling and your throat parched, desperate for fresh water. And finally, a handful of dried peas or rice, hard and unyielding, rattling in your tin cup, offering scant comfort or nutritional value. Imagine trying to make these ingredients stretch to coax sustenance from such meager offerings. The flour, mixed with precious, often brackish water, would be baked into hard, flat cakes over an open fire, tasting mostly of salt, smoke, and a pervasive sense of desperation. The pork, boiled repeatedly in an attempt to leach out some of the overwhelming salt, would still leave your palate assaulted, your thirst intensified. Flavor was an unheard of luxury, nutrition a desperate daily pursuit against the odds. Every bite was an act of survival, not enjoyment. The dull ache in your stomach was a constant companion, a physical manifestation of the scarcity that defined your existence. The hope, of course, the ever-present, flickering flame, lay in the cultivation. The fertile, well-tended fields of England were a distant, almost dreamlike memory, replaced by the harsh reality of Sydney Cove sandy, often infertile soil. You'd watch, with a mixture of fragile hope and deepening dread, as the first European seeds were painstakingly sown: wheat, barley, cabbages, potatoes. But the sun here was fierce, an unrelenting orb in the vast blue sky. The rain unpredictable, often arriving in torrents or not at all, and the soil unaccustomed to these foreign demands, often refused to yield its bounty. You'd see rows of tender green shoots emerge, a momentary surge of optimism, only to watch them slowly wither and brown under the relentless Australian sun, their promise fading into dust, their potential shriveling before your very eyes. The sight of a wilting plant, a crop failure, was a profound blow to the spirit, a visible manifestation of the land's stubborn resistance, a cruel reminder of your precarious position. Desperation, however, breeds resourcefulness, a primal instinct for survival. The indigenous people, long masters of this land, knew its secrets intimately. But those invaluable lessons were slow to be learned, or often tragically ignored. So, you learned to scrounge. You'd venture into the bush, timidly at first, then with increasing urgency and a growing understanding of the subtle signs of edible life, searching for anything that might supplement your meager rations. You might discover patches of what the colonists began to call native spinach, a wild green offering a much-needed, if slightly bitter, freshness. It was a taste of the unfamiliar, a sharp, earthy bitterness that cut through the monotonous blandness of salt and starch, a raw burst of life in a diet of death. Sometimes, if you were incredibly lucky, you'd stumble upon tiny bush berries, small, jewel, like bursts of tartness that offered a momentary reprieve from the pervasive blandness, a fleeting sweetness that reminded you of home. These were not the sweet, plump berries of home, cultivated and familiar, but something wilder, more intensely flavored, often with an astringent, puckering edge. Every leaf, every berry, every root, painstakingly identified and gathered, became a small victory, a tiny act of defiance against the gnawing emptiness. The taste of these foraged treasures was a constant reminder of scarcity, a bitter struggle. Yet each mouthful, no matter how small, carried a fragile seed of hope, The hope that tomorrow, perhaps, there would be enough, that this new land might eventually yield its secrets and sustain you. Your wardrobe, if you could even call it that, was less a collection and more a testament to enduring scarcity, a constant, tangible reminder of how far you'd traveled, not just in distance but in comfort and expectation. The fine European wools and linens that might have been part of your life before the voyage, or even those you packed for the journey, had long since succumbed to the relentless wear of sea salt, cramped quarters, and the sheer passage of 8 unforgiving months. Now, in this new land, the clothes you wore were a second skin woven from hardship, a rough canvas painted with the dust and sweat of a new demanding world. Imagine the fabric against your skin. It wasn't the soft, familiar feel of well-worn cotton or the smooth glide of a finer weave. Number this was coarse linen, perhaps canvas if you were fortunate enough to have scavenged a piece from a discarded sail or a tent no longer fit for purpose. It clung to you stiff and unyielding, each movement accompanied by the slight rustle and drag of the heavy material. The fibers, once perhaps uniform and neat, were now matted and tangled, a testament to countless washes in brackish water, if they were washed at all, and the constant friction of daily toil. These weren't garments you changed daily. This was your uniform for survival, worn day in and day out through the searing heat of the sun and the surprisingly cool bite of the evening air. The fabric had absorbed the very essence of your new existence. Sweat, copious and unavoidable in the Australian summer, had seeped into every fiber, drying to a stiff, salty crust that scratched against your skin, sometimes even causing small, itchy rashes in the creases of your elbows or behind your knees. Dust, the fine red particulate of this ancient land, had become an indelible part of the weave, staining the once pale linen to a muted ochre, a perpetual patina of the Australian bush. The smell of it, a subtle blend of human exertion, dry earth, and perhaps a faint, lingering hint of wood smoke, was the scent of your daily life. Feel the weight of it. Each garment, though simple and cut tuning a tunic, a pair of trousers center felt substantial, heavy with the accumulated layers of grime and repeated mending. Patches, often cut from other equally worn-out pieces of fabric, were sewn on with thick, clumsy stitches, making the material even more rigid in places. A tear in your knee from a fall. A patch, a fraying cuff from constant rubbing against rough surfaces. Another patch. Your clothes were a patchwork map of your daily struggles, each stitch a silent story of perseverance, each added layer a testament to the scarcity of new cloth. The seams, once neat, were now often bulky and uneven, pressing against your skin, a constant, low-level discomfort. And your feet. Oh, your feet. The boots you brought, if you had any, were a luxury that quickly deteriorated. The hard, unyielding ground of Sydney Cove, littered with sharp stones, the rough bark of fallen trees, and the constant friction of walking miles each day, quickly took its toll. Leather, once sturdy, cracked and peeled under the relentless sun and the occasional unexpected downpour. Soles, once thick, were thin and then disappeared altogether, leaving gaping holes. You'd feel the sharp bite of the stone through the worn leather, then the sudden chill of the earth directly against your skin as the sole gave way completely. A moment of startling vulnerability for your foot. Soon, the boots were beyond repair, perhaps discarded, perhaps kept for the valuable leather scraps that might be repurposed for a hinge or a strap. And then you walked barefoot. Feel that, the dry, warm earth beneath your soles, sometimes soft and yielding in a patch of dust, sometimes harsh and unforgiving over a stretch of gravel or exposed rock. The prickle of dry grass, the sudden sting of a sharp twig, or a small, unseen stone. Your feet, once accustomed to the soft comfort of shoes, grew calloused and tough, adapting to the raw intimacy of the land. The skin on your soles would thicken, becoming almost leathery, providing a natural, if imperfect, shield. Yet still, the occasional cut or scrape was an inevitable part of your daily journey. Sometimes, if you were resourceful, or if a small animal had been snared for food, you might fashion crude coverings from animal skins. Imagine the feel of stiff, untanned hide wrapped around your feet, perhaps a kangaroo or wallaby skin, roughly shaped and tied with strips of bark or sinew. It was less a boot and more a protective sheath, offering a modicum of defense against the elements and the sharp terrain, but still a far cry from the footwear of the world you left behind. The hair, if left on, would tickle and itch, and the smell of raw hide, faintly musky and primal, would linger around you, another scent woven into the tapestry of your new life, a constant reminder of the wilderness that surrounded you and the ingenuity required to survive it. Your clothing was not about fashion or comfort, it was about survival. It was a barrier, however thin and worn, between you and the elements. It was a silent testament to your tenacity, a rough canvas painted with the dust and sweat of a new, demanding world. And as you moved through your day, the stiff fabric would chafe. The worn patches would remind you of past repairs, and the ground would press against your hardened soles, a constant tactile connection to the raw reality of Sydney Cove, a reality that permeated every fiber of your being. The first tentative fingers of dawn would stretch across Sydney Cove, painting the eastern sky in muted hues of gray and soft rose. There was no gentle awakening here, no lingering in a warm bed. The day's demands were absolute, pulling you from the shallow slumber of a straw mattress or a rough canvas cot, often before the sun had fully cleared the horizon. The air, still cool from the night, carried the faint, earthy scent of damp soil and the sharper, more resinous aroma of eucalyptus, a smell that would soon become as familiar as your own breath, a constant companion in the vast open air workshop of the colony. As the sun climbed, its light turning from soft pastels to a brilliant, unyielding white, the rhythm of the day would begin, and for most, that rhythm was the relentless mechanical beat of labor. Your task often was the bush, the endless, sprawling, unyielding bush that pressed in on all sides, a green and gray tide threatening to reclaim the small, fragile clearings you had carved out for settlement, for cultivation, for mere breathing room. It was a battle fought inch by painful inch against a tenacious and ancient adversary. Imagine the axe in your hands. It's heavy, its wooden handle worn smooth by countless grips, polished by sweat and friction, its head glinting dully in the morning sun, already warm to the touch. You lift it, the muscles in your shoulders and back already protesting, a low ache that would deepen with each swing, a familiar companion to your daily existence. Then the descent, a steady, deliberate motion guided by years of necessity, by the precise calculation of where the blade must strike. The blade cleaves through the air, gathering momentum, and then thwack. A dull, resonant thud as it bites into the hard, fibrous wood of an iron bark or a stringy bark. A sound that reverberates not just through the air, but through the very ground beneath your feet. This wasn't the clean, crisp crack of softer European timber. Australian hardwoods were notoriously tough, dense, and unyielding, almost petrified in their density. The axe would often bounce back, sending a jarring vibration up your arms, a dull ache reverberating through your bones, a constant reminder of the wood's stubborn resistance. You'd have to strike again and again, aiming for the same spot, slowly, painstakingly widening the gash in the trunk. Thwack, thwack, thwack. The sound would echo, muffled by the dense foliage, joining the chorus of other axes. A slow, percussive symphony of human endeavor against the wild, a persistent heartbeat of the fledgling colony. Feel the vibration travel from the handle up your arms, through your shoulders, settling deep in your chest. It's a constant, low hum, a physical manifestation of the effort, a subtle tremor throughout your whole body. Your breath would come in steady, measured gasps, not sharp and ragged from sudden exertion, but deep and rhythmic, matching the swing of the axe, a slow, deliberate exchange with the air. Sweat would begin to prickle on your brow, then trickle down your temples, mixing with the dust and the faint, sticky residue of sap, tracing small, salty paths across your skin. The scent of freshly cut eucalyptus, sharp and medicinal, would fill the air around you, a potent, invigorating perfume of the bush. Then the saw. Once the tree was felled or a branch needed to be sectioned for building or firewood, the saw would come into play. A long two-man saw. Perhaps its handles grasped by two figures working in unison, or a shorter, single-handed one for smaller tasks, its teeth gleaming like a row of tiny, sharp mountains. Imagine the teeth catching on the wood, the initial resistance, then the gradual grating glide as the blade moved through the grain. The sound is less violent than the axe, more sustained. A continuous rasp that speaks of slow, deliberate progress, a relentless chewing through the tough fibers. Feel the saw's teeth pull and release, creating a fine shower of sawdust that smells sharp and green, a scent that mingles with the warm, dry air, adding another layer to the complex aroma of the bush. Your arms would move back and forth, a steady, pendulum-like motion, your body swaying slightly with each stroke, a dance of human and tool against the unyielding wood. It wasn't a race, it was a marathon. Each cut, each log, each cleared patch of ground was a small victory, slowly, painstakingly won. A tiny step forward in the monumental task of taming this wild land. This labor was not about intensity, it was about endurance. It was a slow, repetitive, almost meditative rhythm. The sun would beat down, relentless and unforgiving. The flies would buzz incessantly around your face. The muscles would ache with a dull, persistent throb. But the work would continue. The rhythmic swing of the axe, the steady rasp of the saw, the methodical clearing of the land foodie. These were the heartbeats of the early colony. They were sounds that could become almost hypnotic. A drone that allowed the mind to drift, even as the body toiled, finding a strange solace in the repetition. The repetitive nature of the work, the lack of immediate reward beyond basic survival, could induce a kind of numbness, a detachment. Your thoughts might wander, drifting back to distant shores, to faces you might never see again, or to simpler days of less demanding toil. But the physical demands were always present, grounding you, bringing you back to the present moment, to the feel of the rough tool in your hand, to the unyielding resistance of the bush, to the slow, steady rhythm of your own breath. It was a rhythm that defined existence, a slow, persistent drumbeat under the vast, indifferent Australian sky, a constant, reassuring pulse in the heart of the wilderness. One of the most profound, unsettling shifts for those first arrivals was the sky itself. Not just the quality of the light, which was sharper, more intense than the soft, often diffused light of Europe, but the very orientation of the heavens. Everything was inverted, upside down, backwards. It was a cosmic disorientation that mirrored the earthly one, a constant, subtle reminder that you were truly on the other side of the world, a mere speck clinging to the underside of the globe. Imagine your first Christmas here. Instead of the crisp, cold air, the crackling fires, the promise of snow, the festive glow of hearth and home, you were met with a searing, oppressive heat. December, a month of festive warmth and cozy gatherings in England, was here the height of summer. The air shimmered over the sun-baked ground. The cicadas buzzed with a furious intensity, and the very idea of a plum pudding or a roasted goose felt absurd, almost cruel, in the stifling humidity. You'd try to celebrate, perhaps, with what little you had, a scrawny piece of salted pork, a few precious drops of rum, but the feeling of the season was utterly alien, a celebration out of sync with the natural world you had always known, a ghost of memory rather than a present reality. The heavy woolens you might have brought were unbearable, replaced by the thinnest, most ragged linen available, offering little respite from the relentless sun. Then came July. In Europe, July was the heart of summer, long days of sunshine, bountiful harvests, and the warmth of the sun on your skin. Here, it was the depths of winter. The days grew short, the sun, though still bright, offered less warmth, and the nights grew long and surprisingly cold, a chill that seeped into your makeshift shelter, through the thin walls of Wattle and Daub, chilling you to the bone. You'd huddle closer to the meager fire, its smoke stinging your eyes and throat, but its warmth a precious commodity, a small island of comfort in the encroaching cold. The wind, when it blew, carried a bite, whistling through the eucalyptus leaves with a mournful sigh, sometimes bringing with it a fine, chilling rain. The ground would be damp and cold, sometimes even frosty in the early mornings, a stark contrast to the summer Christmases, another perplexing reversal in this new, strange land. This inversion of seasons was a constant, almost playful mockery of your ingrained expectations. Your body, your very instincts, were programmed for a different calendar, a different rhythm of the year, a cycle of growth and dormancy that simply did not apply here. It was like living in a mirror where everything was familiar yet fundamentally reversed, a perpetual sense of being slightly out of step with the world around you. This constant recalibration, this gentle mental tug, could be surprisingly soothing in its regularity, a new truth to accept. But it was the night sky that perhaps offered the most profound sense of cosmic displacement. When darkness fell, deep and vast over Sydney Cove, a darkness undimmed by city lights, you'd look up. Your eyes, accustomed to seeking out the familiar constellations, would search instinctively for Polaris, the North Star, that steadfast beacon that had guided sailors and dreamers for millennia, a fixed point in the celestial sphere. But it wasn't there, it was gone. obscured by the very curvature of the earth, lost below the horizon of this new hemisphere. A familiar friend vanished. Instead, your gaze would fall upon something else. Something brilliant yet utterly alien. The Southern Cross. Imagine seeing it for the first time. 4 bright stars, forming a distinctive cross shape, seemingly suspended in the inky blackness, surrounded by a swirling river of countless other stars. The Milky Way a thick, luminous band overhead. It was beautiful, undeniably so, a dazzling jewel box of stars, unlike anything you had witnessed before, its brilliance sharper, clearer in the unpolluted air. But it was also profoundly unsettling. It was a constant visual declaration that you were no longer in your old world, no longer under the same sky. The Southern Cross was a guide, yes, but it guided you in a direction that was, to your European mind, literally upside down. It was a celestial compass for a world that felt reversed, leading you further into the unknown. Feel the vastness of that night sky, the sheer number of stars that seemed to burn with an intensity you hadn't known, each one a tiny distant sun. Without the familiar reference points, the sky felt larger, more ancient, more indifferent, a silent, majestic witness to your small human endeavor. This was a sky that had watched over the Aboriginal peoples for tens of thousands of years, a sky whose stories and patterns were utterly foreign to you, whose deep, resonant myths were entirely unknown. There was a profound loneliness in that unfamiliarity, a sense of being adrift not just on a new continent, but under a new universe, a new set of rules you had yet to learn. Yet, in that very unfamiliarity, there was also a strange kind of peace, a letting go of the old world. As you lay beneath that inverted sky, the Southern Cross slowly wheeling overhead, its unfamiliar brilliance could lull your mind into a strange state of quiet contemplation. The sheer scale of it, the endless expanse of stars, dwarfed your earthly concerns, your daily struggles, making them seem small and fleeting. It was a reminder of something far larger than yourself, a cosmic perspective that could make your own anxieties seem small and distant, dissolving into the vastness of the night. The rhythmic chirping of unseen insects in the bush, the distant rustle of leaves in the eucalyptus trees, the gentle lapping of waves against the shore thavern. These sounds would blend with the silent, majestic turning of the Southern Cross. Your mind, adrift in this new celestial landscape, could begin to empty, to release the grip of the familiar, allowing the vast, silent beauty of this inverted world to wash over you, pulling you gently into a state of deep, peaceful surrender. The Southern Cross, a symbol of this new, strange land, would become a silent guardian watching over your rest, a constant, comforting presence in the quiet darkness. You wake before the first hint of dawn, the air still holding the deep chill of the southern night. Your mattress, a thin layer of straw on a rough wooden pallet, offers little comfort against the hard earth. The sounds of the barracks begin to stir around you, the rustle of coarse blankets, a low cough, the creak of someone shifting their weight. This is your reality in the year 1788. Or perhaps a few years later, as the fragile settlement of Sydney Cove takes its first uneasy breaths. You are a convict, one of thousands transported across the vast, indifferent ocean, stripped of your name and reduced to a number, a cog in the fledgling penal colony. The initial days, weeks, months were a brutal lesson in humility and absolute submission. The military, the redcoats, they were the law, their authority unquestioned, their punishment swift and often savage. The lash was a constant threat, its whistle through the air a chilling reminder of the hierarchy. Every movement, every conversation, every glance was scrutinized. You learned to keep your head down, your eyes on the task, your thoughts to yourself. The guards, often young men themselves, far from home and hardened by the journey, saw you not as individuals but as a collective mass of potential trouble, a burden to be managed. Your day is dictated by the sun and the guard's whistle. Work begins at first light, a relentless cycle of clearing the land, digging foundations, building the rudimentary structures that will form the backbone of this new society. Your hands, accustomed to softer trades back in England, are now calloused, split, and perpetually aching. The axe rings against stubborn gum trees. The shovel scrapes against the hard, often stony earth. You are part of a gang, working in silence, or with only the most essential communication, under the watchful eyes of an overseer, often a fellow convict who has earned a modicum of trust or fear. But even within this rigid structure, life finds a way to adapt, to bend, to quietly resist. The system, designed to break spirits, inadvertently fostered a peculiar kind of resilience. You learn to read the subtle cues, to understand the unspoken rules, to find the tiny cracks in the edifice of authority. The most powerful currency, more valuable than the meager copper coins that occasionally circulated, was rum. It was the lubricant of the colony, the reward for extra labor, the means of exchange for illicit goods, the solace in a bleak existence. You might, if you were clever, or strong, or simply lucky, gain a small advantage. Perhaps you were skilled with your hand's mind, a carpenter, a blacksmith, a tailor. Your labor, while still forced, might be directed towards tasks that offered a sliver of autonomy. You might be assigned to a small workshop, a rough shed with a dirt floor, where the scent of wood shavings or hot metal mingled with the ever-present dust. Here, under less direct supervision, you could fashion a small item sanbi, a carved wooden spoon, a mended boot, a piece of rough furniture. These items, not officially sanctioned for personal gain, should be bartered. The trade was clandestine, conducted in hushed tones after the day's official labor was done, or during brief, stolen moments. A small wooden box for a measure of rum, a mended tunic for a handful of dried peas, or perhaps a precious, slightly less moldy piece of flour. The clinking of a rum bottle, passed from hand to hand in the shadows, was the sound of a small victory, a temporary escape from the grinding reality. This wasn't about grand rebellion. It was about survival, about carving out a minuscule space of agency in a world that sought to deny it. As the years passed, a new class slowly began to emerge: the merits, the emancipists. These were convicts who had served their time, received their ticket of leave, or even a full pardon. The transition from convict to emancipist was not a sudden liberation, but a gradual, often precarious ascent. You were no longer under the direct, daily control of the military. But the stigma, the invisible chains of your past remained. You were still currency in the eyes of the free settlers who began to arrive, people who saw themselves as superior, untainted by the taint of the prison ship. But the emancipists were the backbone of the nascent economy. They had the practical skills, the knowledge of the land, the sheer grit honed by years of forced labor. Many were granted small plots of land, often in the more challenging, less fertile areas, and given a few tools, some seeds, and the daunting task of making a life for themselves. They built small farms, their Wattle and Daub huts rising out of the bush, a testament to their enduring will. You might find yourself among them, a former convict, now striving to be a free man. The feeling of owning even a small patch of earth, of working for yourself, was profoundly liberating, even if the labor was just as back-breaking. You would still trade in rum, still navigate the unspoken hierarchies, but now you had a voice, however small. You could enter into contracts, however unequal. You could, for the first time in years, look a free settler in the eye, knowing that while your past was written, your future was, at least partially, your own to forge. The struggle was constant. Droughts, floods, raids by desperate bushrangers, often escaped convicts themselves, or misunderstandings with the Aboriginal people who had lived on this land for millennia. Yet the emancipists persevered. They established small businesses, ran taverns, became artisans, and slowly, painstakingly built the foundations of a new society. Their resilience, born from the crucible of transportation and penal servitude, was the quiet, burning hunger that fueled the growth of the colony. It was a testament to the stubborn refusal of the human spirit to be entirely broken, even when cast to the ends of the earth. The clinking of a rum bottle in a dark corner, the whisper of a deal, the steady thud of an axe on your own land. Fourth, these were the sounds of a new social fabric being woven, thread by thread, in the harsh glare of the Australian sun. The sounds of the bush begin before the sun fully rises, a chorus utterly alien to European ears. There is no gentle chirping of robins, no melodious trill of nightingales. Instead, the morning is heralded by the raucous, almost manic laughter of the kookaburra. It begins with a low gurgle, building into a crescendo of wild cackling calls that echo through the gum trees, a sound that can be both startling and deeply unsettling in its intensity. It sounds like a chorus of madmen, a joyful mocking shriek that seems to laugh at your very presence in this strange ancient land. You lie on your straw mattress, listening, trying to make sense of this new world's dawn chorus, a world that seems to be perpetually amused by something you cannot comprehend. As the morning mist burns off, revealing the vast, sprawling landscape, you begin to see the creatures that call this place home. The first sight of a kangaroo is always startling. Not a deer, not a hare, but a creature of impossible grace, moving with powerful, silent bounds across the open clearings. Its large, muscular legs propel it forward, its tail acting as a counterbalance, a living enigma that seems to defy the very laws of European biology. You watch, mesmerized, as it disappears into the sparse undergrowth, a shadow among the shadows, leaving behind only the soft thud of its landing and a ripple in the tall, dry grass. There are no familiar sheep grazing in neat pastures here, no domesticated cattle lowing in the distance. The land is wild, untamed, and its inhabitants are equally so. The trees themselves are strange, not the broad-leafed oaks or elms of England, but the eucalyptus, with its long, slender leaves that hang vertically, offering little shade but releasing a distinct medicinal aroma when warmed by the sun. It is a clean, sharp, almost mentholated scent that permeates the air, a constant reminder that you are far from home. The bark often peels in long, ragged strips, hanging like tattered clothes, revealing smooth, pale trunks beneath. The undergrowth is a tapestry of the unfamiliar. Spiky plants, their leaves sharp and needle, like seem to guard every path. You learn quickly to step carefully to avoid brushing against the harsh foliage that can prick and scratch through even the thickest canvas trousers. There are no gentle wildflowers in the European sense, but rather a profusion of strange, often woody blossoms, poinsettias with their cone, like flowers, grevilleas with their intricate spider, like blooms all in colors that seem muted, yet vibrant, against the dusty green and blue-gray backdrop of the bush. The visual palette of the Australian bush is unlike anything you have ever known. The distant hills are not the verdant green of English countryside, but a hazy, almost ethereal blue-gray, a trick of light and eucalyptus oils suspended in the air. The soil underfoot is often a deep, vibrant red, a stark contrast to the pale grasses and the muted greens of the foliage. It is a landscape of subtle contrasts, of sun-baked earth, and the occasional flash of brilliant color from a parrot or a lizard darting through the undergrowth. At night, the sounds change again. The kookaburras fall silent, replaced by the eerie, mournful cry of the curlew, or the rustling of unseen creatures in the darkness. The air might be filled with the buzzing of insects, a constant hum that fades in and out with the wind. You might hear the distant howl of a dingo, a sound that sends a shiver down your spine, a primordial echo from a wilder, more ancient world. The water holes, when you find them, are teeming with life. Frogs croak in a cacophony of sound, their calls echoing across the still water. Lizards, some small and quick, others large and prehistoric, looking, bask on sun-warmed rocks. The birds are perhaps the most visually stunning ferrets of every conceivable color, their plumage a riot of reds, blues, greens, and yellows, flashing through the trees like living jewels. Their calls are often harsh, squawking, but their beauty is undeniable. You learn to observe, to adapt, to understand the subtle rhythms of this alien ecosystem. You learn which berries are safe to eat, though most are not, which plants might offer some relief for an ailment, and which creatures to avoid. The bush is not merely a backdrop, it is a living, breathing entity, full of secrets and dangers, wonders and mysteries. It is a constant teacher, forcing you to shed your preconceived notions of nature and embrace a wholly new understanding of the world. The scent of the eucalyptus, that clean, sharp, almost medicinal aroma, becomes deeply ingrained in your memory. It is the smell of survival, the smell of the sun, baked earth, the smell of the wild, untamed land that has become your reluctant home. You close your eyes, and the kookaburra's laugh echoes in your mind. The silent bound of the kangaroo flashes across your inner vision, and the blue-gray haze of the distant mountains settles over your thoughts. A lullaby from a land that is both beautiful and profoundly strange. The decision to leave the relative confines of Sydney Cove to venture beyond the immediate settlement was always a momentous one. It was a step into the great unknown, a journey into a wilderness that stretched seemingly without end towards the distant, hazy blue of the mountain. In those early years, there were no roads, no neatly paved paths to guide your way. The tracks you followed were little more than faint impressions, worn by the passage of aboriginal feet over millennia, or the more recent, deeper ruts carved by the heavy wheels of bullock carts and the slow, deliberate tread of their beasts. Your journey would begin at dawn, often with the lowing of the bullocks as they were yoked, their massive bodies straining against the harness. The cart itself was a crude affair, built of rough, hewn timber, its wheels solid and unyielding. As the bullocks began to move, their hooves, heavy and broad, would sink into the soft red earth, creating a dull, rhythmic thud that resonated through the ground. It was a sound that spoke of slow, arduous progress, a steady, unhurried march into the interior. The cart's axle, ungreased and protesting, would emit a constant mournful groan with every rotation of the wheels. It was a high-pitched, almost musical whine that became the soundtrack to your journey, a ceaseless lament against the friction and the weight it bore. This rhythmic creak and groan, combined with the dull thud of hooves and the occasional crack of the bullock driver's whip, created a hypnotic, almost trance-inducing symphony of movement. You would mostly walk alongside the cart, saving its precious space for supplies, tools, and perhaps a sleeping child. Your feet, encased in rough leather boots, or more often wrapped in patched canvas or even animal hides, would kick up clouds of fine, red dust with every step. The dust would cling to your clothes, settle in your hair, and permeate every pore, leaving a dry, earthy taste on your tongue. It was the taste of the land, the taste of exploration, the taste of endless miles. The sun, unyielding and fierce, would beat down from a vast, pale sky. There was little shade to be found along the rudimentary tracks, only the occasional, sparse canopy of the gum trees, their leaves offering scant relief from the searing heat. The air would shimmer above the dry ground, creating mirages in the distance, teasing you with the illusion of water where there was none. You learned to conserve every drop of precious water, carried in a canvas bag or a wooden barrel, savoring each sip. The landscape itself was a character in your journey. It was not the manicured fields of Europe, but a wild, untamed expanse of scrubland, sparse forests, and rocky outcrops. The vegetation would change subtly as you ventured further inland from the more open, coastal plains to the denser, more rugged terrain leading towards the Blue Mountains. The scent of eucalyptus, ever present, would grow stronger in some areas, mingling with the dry, earthy smell of the soil and the faint, sweet perfume of unseen wildflowers. The journey was punctuated by stops to wait, to rest the bullocks, to mend a broken wheel, to gather firewood for the night. You would pitch a simple canvas lean, or simply roll out your blanket under the vast, star-dusted sky. The silence of the bush at night, broken only by the chirping of crickets or the distant call of an owl, was profound, a deep, encompassing quiet that made the sounds of your own breathing seem amplified. The Blue Mountains, a formidable barrier to westward expansion, loomed on the horizon for days, a hazy blue-tinged wall of rock and forest. Reaching them was a feat in itself, but traversing them was another challenge entirely. The tracks became steeper, more treacherous, winding through deep gorges and over rocky ridges. The bullocks strained, their muscles rippling under their hides, their breath coming in ragged gasps. The cart groaned louder, threatening a splinter with every jolt. You would climb, slowly, painstakingly, your feet finding purchase on loose stones, your hands grasping at tough, dry bushes. The friction of your boots against the earth, the slow, grinding effort of each step, was a constant, physical reminder of the vastness of this continent. It was a journey measured not in miles, but in sweat, in dust, in the sheer endurance of the human spirit. And then, after days or weeks, you would reach a vantage point, looking out over an endless expanse of blue-gray ridges, valleys stretching as far as the eye can see. It was a landscape of immense beauty, but also of overwhelming scale, a reminder of how small and vulnerable you were in this ancient land. The dust, which had been your constant companion, would settle for a moment, and you would stand in silence, breathing in the vastness, the solitude, the quiet majesty of the Australian interior. The memory of the bullock's steady thud, the cart's rhythmic groan, and the endless friction of your feet on the red earth would be etched into your very being, a testament to the journeys that slowly, painstakingly opened up a new world. As the last sliver of sun dipped below the distant, unfamiliar horizon, a profound quiet would descend upon the fledgling settlements, scattered along Sydney Cove. The vibrant, almost aggressive blues and greens of the Australian bush seemed to melt into an undifferentiated gray, then into an impenetrable black. This wasn't the soft, familiar twilight of a European village, where the glow of a dozen cottages might warm the approaching dusk. Here, the darkness was vast, ancient, and utterly consuming, stretching out beyond the small, precarious clearings like an endless, velvet cloak. You might be sitting on a rough-hewn log outside your Wattle and Daub hut, the last vestiges of daylight clinging to the smoke curling from the cooking fire. The air, which had been thick with the heat of the day, now carried a distinct coolness, a breath of the vast continent awakening to its nocturnal rhythms. The scent of eucalyptus, sharp and medicinal, mingled with the earthy smell of damp soil and the lingering aroma of wood smoke, a constant companion in this new world. Inside the hut, the darkness would be even more profound, broken only by the flickering dance of a small, carefully tended flame. Perhaps a single candle, precious and rationed, made from rendered animal fat, or if you were among the slightly more fortunate, a tiny whale oil lamp. Its light, a soft, golden tremor, barely pushed back the encroaching shadows, instead casting them into exaggerated, dancing giants on the rough mud walls. Every shadow seemed to hold a secret, every creak of the timber frame a whisper from the surrounding wilderness. This light was not for illumination in the modern sense. It was a beacon against the unknown, a fragile declaration of human presence in a landscape that cared little for it. Families would gather around this solitary point of light. Children, their faces smudged with dirt and fatigue, would huddle close, their eyes wide reflecting the tiny flame. The day's back-breaking labor, the endless clearing of the bush, the struggle with the unyielding soil, all of it would begin to recede, replaced by a different kind of quiet. This was a quiet born of exhaustion, but also of a strange, shared intimacy. The world outside was immense and indifferent, but within the small circle of that lamp's glow there was connection, a fragile warmth. Conversations would be low, almost murmurs, as if speaking too loudly might disturb the profound silence beyond the hut. Someone might recount a memory from England, a half-forgotten street corner in London, the taste of fresh bread from a baker's oven, or the sound of church bells on a Sunday morning. These were not tales told with longing, but with a detached sort of remembrance, as if speaking of a dream from a lifelong past. The past was a distant shore, and this new land, for all its harshness, was now the only reality. Often the talk would turn to the day's small victories and enduring struggles. The stubbornness of the soil, the elusive promise of a good harvest, the unending task of felling trees whose roots seemed to cling to the very core of the earth. Sometimes there would be talk of the strange creatures that moved in the darkness just beyond the palisade, the rustling in the undergrowth, the distant, mournful cry of an unknown bird, or the sudden, unsettling thud of a kangaroo passing by. These sounds, alien and ancient, were a constant reminder of the wild, untamed world that pressed in on all sides. The crackle of the fire, the soft murmur of voices, the gentle sigh of the wind through the eaves of the hut. Fort, these were the lullabies of a colonial night. The solitude of that single light, a tiny star in a universe of darkness, was not frightening, but rather profoundly comforting. It was a shared vulnerability, a collective breath held against the immensity of the unknown, and as the hours deepened, the conversations would fade, one by one, into the gentle rhythm of sleep, leaving only the soft glow of the lamp, a silent guardian against the encroaching night. The air would grow cooler, the scents more subtle, and the sounds of the bush would become a distant, hypnotic hum, inviting you deeper into the quiet embrace of slumber. For years, the story of this new land had been one of struggle, of survival, measured in ounces of flour, and the constant threat of starvation. It was a place defined by its punitive origins, a vast, open, at the edge of the world. But deep beneath the surface of this relentless daily grind, a quiet transformation was beginning to stir, a shift in the very identity of the colony and its people. This change wouldn't come with the clash of swords or the roar of cannons, but with the gentle, persistent bleating of sheep. Imagine the vast, rolling hills and plains beyond the immediate reach of Sydney Cove. These were landscapes that seemed to stretch forever, often dry and sparsely vegetated, but capable of sustaining life in ways the early settlers hadn't fully understood. Into this landscape, a new kind of wealth began to walk, soft-footed and unassuming. It was the MacArthur family, among others, who saw the potential in these seemingly desolate lands. They weren't looking for gold yet. They were looking for wool, specifically the fine, soft fleece of the merino sheep. These weren't the coarse, wooled sheep of England, but a breed renowned for the quality of its fiber, a fiber that could fetch high prices in the burgeoning textile mills of Europe. You might have seen the first flocks, small at first, then growing steadily, moving across the sun-baked earth. The sheep, their woolly coats thick with dust and the lanolin that protected them from the harsh sun, would graze with a slow, almost meditative rhythm. Their movement across the landscape was like a living cloud, a gentle, shifting mass of white and off-white against the ochre and muted greens of the Australian bush. The only sounds would be their soft bleating, the occasional clinking of a bell, and the rustle of their hooves through the dry grass. It was a soundscape of quiet industry, a stark contrast to the clanging of axes and the shouts of labor that had defined the earlier days. This wasn't just about sheep, it was about a new kind of purpose. The colony had been a drain, a distant outpost requiring constant support from a weary mother country. But now it had something to offer. Something valuable, something that could connect it to the global economy not as a burden, but as a producer. The wool, packed into bales, would travel the same long sea routes that had once brought only prisoners and meager supplies, now carrying the promise of prosperity back to Europe. For the ordinary settler, the former convict, or the free immigrant who had risked everything to come here, this shift was profound. They were no longer merely British prisoners, serving out a sentence in exile, nor were they simply poor souls, trying to scratch a living from an unforgiving land. They were becoming something new world pioneers. The very earth beneath their feet, once a symbol of their punishment, was now revealing its potential. This change brought a subtle but powerful shift in mindset. The constant, gnawing anxiety of mere survival began to be replaced by a cautious sense of hope, a burgeoning pride. You might have felt it yourself, a quiet settling within your own heart. The land, once an enemy to be conquered, now felt more like a partner, albeit demanding one. The endless toil, the sweat and the dust, were no longer just about avoiding starvation. They were about building something lasting. The sight of those sheep, moving like slow, living clouds across the vast, open spaces, was a visual metaphor for this awakening. It was a peaceful image, one of quiet productivity and a future slowly unfurling. The scent of sun-baked wool, the gentle sounds of the flock, the expansive skies above Suvi. These elements combined to create a sense of calm, a feeling that perhaps finally this distant land was beginning to find its own rhythm, its own identity. It was a time when the dreams of gold were still far off, but the tangible reality of wool was paving the way, weaving a new future, strand by gentle strand. And as you watched the last sheep disappear over the rise, a sense of quiet contentment might have settled over you, a peaceful acknowledgement of a world slowly, steadily taking shape. And so, the relentless sun sets on another day in this ancient land. The stories of struggle, of hunger, of the endless, back-breaking labor begin to dissolve into the rhythmic whispers of the Pacific. You stand perhaps on the rough, hewn timbers of the old Sydney wharf, the very planks that once groaned under the weight of the First Fleet, and later the precious bales of wool. The air, cool now, carries the faint tang of salt and the enduring, clean scent of eucalyptus from the distant bush. The ocean before you stretches out, vast and immeasurable, its surface a shifting tapestry of deep blues and grays under the gathering twilight. The waves, ancient and tireless, roll in with a slow, deliberate cadence, breaking against the rocky shore with a soft, persistent sigh. Each wave is a breath, a gentle exhalation from the heart of the world, washing away the echoes of human toil. The shouts of the overseers, the clatter of tools, and the low murmurs of tired voices. Listen closely. The wind, a soft, invisible hand, moves through the tall, slender eucalyptus trees that line the distant ridges. It carries with it the last vestiges of the day's commotion, smoothing out the rough edges of memory. The sharp crack of the axe, the grating saw, the heavy thud of a felled tree, all are gone now, replaced by the rustle of leaves, a sound like soft rain on a dry roof, an infinitely calming murmur that invites release. The historical tapestry, woven with threads of hardship and resilience, now unravels gently into the night. The early settlers, the convicts, the soldiers, the families who built their lives from nothing but grit and hopes of nothing. They have all played their part. Their struggles, their small joys, their quiet dreams under a sky filled with unfamiliar stars are now part of the very dust beneath your feet. You can almost feel the presence of all those who came before, their spirits intertwined with the land. They worked, they wept, they learned to survive in this beautiful, demanding wilderness. And now they rest. Their labors are complete. The long journey from the other side of the world, the arduous task of taming the bush, the slow, patient building of a new society found. It has all led to this moment of quietude. Look up. Above you, the Southern Cross, brilliant and unwavering, hangs in the velvet blackness. It is the same constellation that guided the first navigators, the same silent witness to every sunrise and sunset over this continent. Its light, ancient and pure, falls softly upon the land, illuminating nothing but the vastness and the peace. Let the rhythmic sound of the waves be your guide. Feel the coolness of the air on your skin, the gentle breath of the wind. The world around you is settling, quieting, drawing inward. The stories have been told. The work has been done. There is nothing left to do but simply allow your own breath to deepen, to synchronize with the slow, steady rhythm of the ocean. Feel the tension draining from your body, from your mind. The sounds of the past, the faint echoes of human endeavor, are fading, becoming part of the universal hum of the earth. Close your eyes if you wish. Let the gentle darkness enfold you, just as it enfolded those weary souls hundreds of years ago. The stars watch over you. The ocean sings its timeless lullaby. You are safe. You are at peace. All the laborers have gone to sleep. All the dust has settled, and now it is your turn to rest. Drift deeper, deeper, into the soft embrace of slumber, guided by the ancient stars and the endless, soothing rhythm of the sea. Sleep now.